Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From the Studio. I'm your host, Corey Riggs, happy to welcome you into our MC22 studio, and so thankful that you're joining us once again. Episode number 8 is upon us. We have a great show lined up for you this week. We begin by tackling a different topic in this COVID-19 era. We've talked at length about how the world has changed in the last 10 weeks or so, how high school seniors have been affected, how to try and keep you and your family safe. And now we turn our lens to the impact of the coronavirus and what it's done in the arts scene. Live music performances, theater, and more, all canceled in the name of flattening the curve. Sarah Dresser is the manager of the Office of Cultural Affairs in Columbia, and she will join us first. Then we'll dive back into the wide world of sports as many here in the Show Me State and across the country wait for the return of Major League Baseball. We will check in with Joel Goldberg, reporter and host from Fox Sports Kansas City, to see what the expectation levels are for the Kansas City Royals and maybe discover what goes into preparing for a Major League broadcast. If you're enjoying the show and would like to reach out to us, provide us with new topics or guests you'd like to see on our show, feel free to do so on Twitter @FromTheStudio22. We'd love to hear from you. Stay tuned. Sarah Dresser joins us from the studio after this. Welcome back, everybody. The Office of Cultural Affairs is a part of Columbia, Missouri, and they have a mission to try and make the best environment for artists and organizations in their community. We are now joined by Sarah Dresser, the manager of that group from Columbia. Sarah, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
Well, thank you for taking the time to join us. I wanted to speak to you because this is kind of a unique department that you lead in Columbia. It's not something that a ton of communities put a huge emphasis on, but it is in Columbia. Start by kind of explaining to people what it is the Office of Cultural Affairs does.
Right, so we are a department of the City of Columbia, and we do a number of different programs, and I kind of like to put them in different categories. One of the big components is communications to our citizens. So we're making sure that people know about all the different arts events that are happening. We put out a number of arts guides. We have an email newsletter. And then we also have a handful of some special events throughout the year. So we're not doing a ton of programming. You might see similar types of departments in other cities doing a lot of programming. We aren't necessarily doing a lot of the programming, but we are supporting it through our annual funding program where we are putting money out into the community, directly funding our nonprofit local arts organizations, and they must apply for that funding. And then finally, we have a public art program. Part of that is the Percent for Art program. So we're doing a lot of different things. We're a small department of 3 people, but it keeps it pretty exciting, and we're happy to support the arts in a lot of different ways here in Columbia.
What is the Percent for the Art program? Tell us about that.
Right. So that is a program that was established by city ordinance back in 1997. And it states that any city capital improvement project, that is the building above ground, it could be a new building or renovation project that has a budget of over $1 million, that 1% of the total budget will be allocated towards site-specific public art. Okay. So we've had 14 completed projects since that was passed in 97. And currently we have 2 that are ongoing. So one of those is the Molly Thomas Bowden Neighborhood Policing Center. As that gets built, there'll be public art right out front. And then the latest project is the new Columbia Regional Airport Terminal that will also have some artwork components. So that's we're kind of in the early stages of getting those artists selected right now.
Well, that must be a fun process. It has not been a fun time for a lot of people, obviously, across the country, across the world, in the middle of the coronavirus. There's been a lot of conversations about how it's affected the economy, how it's affected joblessness, how it's affected the sports world. But not a lot of people have been talking about how it affects the arts community. I would assume there in Columbia, you all have now lost out on a number of events and festivals that probably were on the schedule for the spring.
That's right. You know, we've had a number of groups cancel their events and also the large-scale festivals as we traditionally know them. So just recently would be the Unbound Book Festival, Art in the Park that takes place in Stevens Lake Park in June, as well as the Missouri Symphony's Hot Summer Night Festival. But all those groups actually have been able to think of other ways to share their programming, maybe virtually with the community. So, you know, even though the traditional scheduled in-person elements have been canceled for this year, those particular groups have looked at ways to connect their artists and their programming through, you know, Zoom or through other online venues. You know, and the same thing goes for a lot of our smaller agencies that might have had their theater seasons disrupted. They might have had to cancel some shows, or other groups canceling concerts, gallery crawls. So, a lot of those in-person events have been disrupted, and as we're kind of now gradually reopening and allowing gatherings to increase, I would say that would continue throughout the summer. It won't go back to regularly scheduled programming right away, but I do know that a lot of our agencies are trying to continue to reach out to the community. A lot are taking advantage of Zoom, maybe offering drama classes for children on Zoom, or packets for parents or groups to take with them, and kind of have a summer camp at home, with resources. So the nice thing about the arts is that people are very creative in trying to adapt. We're this community, especially nonprofit arts community, we're used to trying to put out a lot with very limited resources. So now it's kind of, now we're in a different situation. So how can we still continue to serve people of all ages with technology and the resources we have? So I know a lot that are adapting to that. And then, a lot of people I've seen continue to support these groups financially, because, after we hopefully get through this next time, this period of time, however long that lasts, we want to make sure that these groups are able to stay here in town and they're able to sustain what we've grown to love.
What do you think the recovery effort will look like? I mean, obviously you've got artists, in the traditional sense, we think of painters, sculptors. You've got musicians that were used to performing 3-4 nights a week in bars and downtown and outdoor concerts. As we enter this Show Me Strong recovery phase here for the state of Missouri, what do you think the recovery for the arts community is going to look like?
Right, it'll look different for just really depending on the avenue. Visual artists might have a different time than a musician. They rely on kind of different audiences. So it really is going to be different for everyone. I've seen groups in town who continue to have online virtual concerts, and there's ways for people to leave tips and pay those musicians to as they watch a concert maybe at home. Of course, visual artists are still hopefully able to work and showcase their pieces through online exhibits or through other resources. It's really gonna depend. I know a lot of our nonprofit arts organizations who might have employees, they're able to take advantage of some of the CARES Act funding and some of the other kind of government resources on a large scale to continue with their operations, so they won't necessarily be struggling as much with their staff. So it really is, it's kind of hard to tell what the path forward is, but we're here too to be a resource to help connect. We deal a lot more with the nonprofit groups in town, but connect them with whatever resources they need to continue to survive.
Another thing you do that I found fascinating when I was doing my research on the office is you have different projects where you get local artists involved. You currently have one going on, I believe, that involves maybe decorating traffic boxes. What can you tell me about that?
Right, so that is our traffic box art program has been going on for a number of years, since 2007, and that's a really fun way to get our local artists out in the public realm. So each year we select a different box in downtown Columbia. We're kind of running out of boxes, so in the next couple of years we might have to branch out from downtown.
You need some new intersections, apparently.
I know, so we might have to. You might see this program spreading from the center of the town. But one box is selected, and we put out a call for artists, and they submit design proposals that then get reviewed by our standing committee on public art. And they choose a design to go forward with, and then that artist is able to paint the box, or in some cases they make it a vinyl wrap, so it might be a kind of have more digital elements to it. So it's basically like a big sticker that gets installed on the box. Mm-hmm. Those have lasted very well, and it's just a way to brighten up downtown Columbia. Also, it originally started and continues to abate graffiti. A lot of those big silver boxes get tagged with stickers or other tags. So this is a way to create them as artful objects. And usually people won't be vandalizing those artful objects. They'll kind of respect the space. And we've seen great success with that. And like I said, a lot of these artists, they won't have maybe done a public piece before. They're usually maybe in their studio creating work. So this is also a great opportunity for them to get their work out there and maybe paint out in the, right on the street and interact with people as they're putting up their work.
Well, I think it's a great project, and I enjoy following along and seeing where the next one will come from. If people want to get more information about this project or the Office of Cultural Affairs, where can they do that?
Right. So I encourage people to visit our website, como.gov/art. We have a call for artists section. People can sign up to receive emails whenever we put new calls out. And then I would also encourage people to sign up for our art news email newsletter. Usually when things are happening all the time, we send that out once a week. Right now it's a little bit more every 2 weeks or every month, as things are coming back up on the schedule. But that's a good way to stay updated on all the opportunities that are going on in the community.
Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Sarah Dresser joins us from Columbia. More from the studio here in just a minute.
As COVID-19 impacts our community, Metro Appliances and More continues to serve you. Although our showroom is closed, our business is open. Live chat on our website or call the store and speak to an appliance expert. Metro Appliances and More is committed to serving you safely. Even in uncertain times, Blue Current remains open to serve you. At Blue Current, almost all services can be completed from your mobile device in the safety of your own home. Visit our website for details or download our app. Blue Current is committed to building better communities together.
Welcome back to From the Studio, everybody. Corey Riggs now joined by part of the broadcast team for the Kansas City Royals, getting ready for the beginning of his 13th season covering the boys in blue in Kansas City. The familiar face of Joel Goldberg joins us now. Joel, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Corey. Good to be with you in these unique settings that we now live in, what we now call television.
Unique would be a good way to describe it. Let me ask you, what have you been doing to fill up your quarantine time? No baseball to speak of. I'm not getting up at 4 a.m. to watch Korean baseball right now currently. That's a little before my alarm goes off, but I know you've got your hands involved in a couple of different podcasts. Have you been staying busy with those?
Yeah, I have, and I've actually found a lot of fulfillment in it. There's no replacing the baseball season, obviously. I think that's true for anyone that has any interest in baseball, even in the most casual or least casual of ways, I should say. So, can't replace that. last I checked, they're not asking me when to start. So I can't control that. I mean, it's the old control the controllables. So about 3 years ago, I started on the side a corporate speaking career, and I love that. I love getting out to businesses, sharing the lessons learned in sports and leadership that translate very well to what I call the quote unquote real world. And I started a podcast about 2.5 years ago to support that business, really telling the story of local entrepreneurs and leaders and different things like that. It's once a week. And I realized when this pandemic hit, I had about 9 or 10 episodes recorded in advance because I thought, well, they'll coincide with the start of the season, lighten the workload a little bit as the baseball cast begins. Then obviously we know what happened. And none of these podcasts addressed the pandemic because when I recorded them in January, February, it wasn't a thing yet. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, how could we talk? I knew everybody would be talking about this. I knew everybody's lives were affected. And I thought, why don't I just do a daily video version to coincide with the weekly podcast? And now here we are closing in on 50 episodes. And it's not only become, for me, a nice outlet and a way to connect with people, but it's probably something I'll continue even once baseball starts. I'm a storyteller. Doesn't have to be about baseball. So I've been really busy with that and a baseball podcast and all kinds of other stuff, just like everyone else, Zoom calls and again, all that world that we're living in.
Yeah, well, you are a jack of all trades like a lot of us in this industry that have to be able to hobble together enough different work to make it a year-round gig. I actually caught some of your work from 2011 earlier today. The Missouri State High School Activities Association puts out what they call a championship classic game every week since the start of the pandemic, and they had you and Rich Baldingers broadcast of the 2011 Class 6 football championship between CBC and Blue Springs South. Do you remember that?
I remember working with Rich. If you had asked me what teams were involved, I would have guessed a St. Louis and a Kansas City team.
It's always a good guess.
Guessed who they were. Yeah, I mean, way to jump out on a limb, right? But yeah, I remember that, and I have. First off, I'm really pretty far removed from the high school scene now, and it just because of where my career has gone, and it didn't intentionally go away from there, but it just is not something I've done for a while. But I can tell you two things. One, I spent a lot, really the bulk of the first half of my television career covering high school sports. Mm-hmm. So I missed that element. There was just always the beautiful innocence in the sense that an event like that was the event of a lifetime for these kids. And, getting into the playoffs in baseball can be the event of a lifetime for players and fans too. But, they get back at it year after year after year. For a lot of these kids, it's the only chance they ever get. And so, to see the student sections and the fan bases and the parents and the relatives all come was always special. The second part about that is I spent a lot of years in that dome. It's probably the last time I was in that building was 2011. But having worked in St. Louis from 1998 through 2007, covered a ton of high school sports, covered obviously, I'm sure I covered every home Rams game that existed from 1998, or at least, my first day, I can remember this, in 1998, working at the Fox affiliate in St. Louis, was the day after McGuire hit his 70th home run. So I believe it would have been a Monday, September 28th or 29th. And I don't remember what happened yesterday, by the way, so just some things stick in the head. And I know that I think it was about 4 games into the season. That would make sense. And so probably from October of 1998 through 2007, I'm sure I covered every Rams game in that old dome. And obviously a lot of memories, whether it be high school sports and a lot of stuff there, or whether it be being on the side. I was actually the guy on the sidelines. I was the sideline reporter for the training camp game, or not training. I was a spring training. My mind's on baseball. The preseason game between the Rams and the San Diego Chargers in 1999, when Rodney Harrison knocked out Trent Green, looked like he probably wrecked the Rams' chances of finally getting there, and that's when we were introduced to a guy named Kurt Warner.
The pride of the University of Northern Iowa Panthers, Kurt Warner. It's one of the stories that you if you lived it, if you're around for it, you'll never forget it. Well, you talk about covering high school sports, covering football, baseball. I know that you're involved in covering hockey in Kansas City as well. And I'm always curious what preparation is like for different broadcasters. You know, everybody has a different sheet that they announce off of and work off of. What is your preparation like when you get ready for any of those things, whether it's a high school football game or covering the Royals?
Well, I think that the higher up the level you go in terms of whatever exposure that league has, so NHL, MLB, you know, the top professional leagues, while there may be more pressure, if that's the way you want to look at it, there are more resources. So to me, it's easier. Yes, there are more eyes on it, but there are more people available to give you that information. Also, from a baseball standpoint, I'm hosting a pre and post game show. So while I need to know those stats and the numbers and the trends, they also need to work into a storyline versus the play-by-play guy, the analyst. They really need to be ready for whatever comes their way over the course of a game, and so you have to have all that stuff ready to go. So I really know how to have that ready. And then again, like I mentioned, from a baseball standpoint, we wake up every single morning. I actually talk about this in one of my speeches about the importance of the people behind the scenes, who oftentimes don't get the credit or the exposure, and oftentimes don't want it, but they're just as important as any of us that are in front of the camera. Nobody sees them. So we wake up every morning during baseball season, if there's a game, and there is usually a 7 to 8 page attachment in an email from one of our associate producers, Dave Holtzman, who does all of our research. So a bulk of the work is done. Really, for me, from a baseball standpoint, it's a matter of then taking that information, saying what's going to apply to today, and getting that down where it's in a nice, neat spot, as neat as I can be. I'm pretty messy, but and then using it, and then pushing aside what I don't need, or then researching some other things and reading and doing all the day-to-day stuff, looking at the other team on and up. Baseball's a little easier too because you have 3 or 4 days to settle in. You don't have to research someone every single time.
Yeah.
Hockey is a bigger challenge for me only because it's minor leagues. Not as many resources, not as many eyeballs on it. NHL level would be easier because you would have more resources. So I will get a packet from the Mavericks on a Thursday or Friday for a weekend game. But getting information sometimes on the other team can be a little bit harder to do. You know this from a high school standpoint. A high school like a CBC, they know how to crank that information out. Yeah. But some of the smaller high schools are ones that haven't been there before, haven't dealt with the media. And so while the Mavericks have dealt with the media, they're not dealing with it on a massive level. So, I may tell them, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help this? And I'll do a lot of the research myself. But I'll wrap it up by saying, and any young broadcasters or anybody that might find it interesting, that you have to just do what works for you. And I tell broadcasters all the time, look at somebody else's sheet, try to figure out what you would do, learn from what they have, and then implement it and see if it worked for you. Can you find what you needed while you're calling the game? What were you missing? What didn't you need? It took me a couple of years with Mavericks, and I've done it for 4 years now. It took, or 5, I can't remember, I think 4. It took me a while to say, okay, I wasted an hour researching this, and you know what? I just went through 3 or 4 games and I never used it. Push it aside. But you know what? I really needed this. And so I think with all of this, it's a matter of routine. It's a matter of process and what works for you in terms of comfort level and preparation.
Joel, I can't let you go without at least asking one question about the Royals. Odds are we're going to see some sort of baseball this year. Odds are it's going to be a shortened season. What's a fair expectation level for the Royals this year?
Well, it'll certainly be a shortened season, so we can definitively say that, unless for some reason there's not a season. And I think the only danger with that, I expect baseball, is, to me, it's less about the money and more about the health. So, any type of major health scare beyond what we're dealing with could set this back. My expectation is we're going to see 80 games or somewhere around there. What's interesting, Corey, about that to me, think about all the times in the course of baseball history where the first half of the season there were 1, 2, 3 teams that you said, boy, we're at the All-Star break and, man, they're in first place or they're contending. We never expected that to happen. And usually, not always, usually those teams eventually fall back. It's the beauty of 162 games. It'll work itself out. It's rare to get a complete fluke in there after 162. You can have a good second half, but the bad first half, messed you up, or vice versa. But over 80 games in baseball terms, that's a little bit more like a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
The Royals, they don't like that term rebuild. I know they all believe that they could have won this year, but there aren't a whole lot of people around baseball that were expecting them to be a contender. If they believe that and they could have got there, all the power to them. You won't get an argument from me. But I think most people believe that they were probably a couple years away from contending from the division. But you get hot, have an early hot month in July or August over the course of 80 games and probably expand to playoffs too. Maybe the Royals can get in this year. How unbelievable would that be in October after everything and all this pandemic? And we're thinking the Royals are taking steps and we're getting closer to some of those minor league pitchers. What if somehow they find themselves in the playoffs? I'm not just making this up here as some crazy thing. We haven't seen an 80-game season. It could happen.
Well, we look forward to seeing baseball back on television soon. We look forward to seeing you back on television very soon in the studio and down on the field. Joel Goldberg, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, and who knows where it'll be, Corey. I don't know if I'll be on the road. I don't know if I'll be at the field. I don't know if I'll be here in my home studio.
Yeah.
As long as I am somewhere and we're talking about baseball, I think at least a little bit will be better with the world.
I completely agree. Joel Goldberg, everybody. We'll come back and wrap up from the studio in just a minute.
At Orange Leaf, we're still swirling, just doing it a little different. Both Springfield Orange Leaf locations are open, offering crew-serve carryouts, party box catering, curbside pickup, and delivery. At Orange Leaf, we're all about making life sweeter.
Kevin here once again for Seeger Toyota of St. Robert. Our service department still has drop-off and pickup available after hours, and pickup and delivery for you locally if you need assistance. We will make sure your vehicle is sanitized before being returned to you as well. That's from your friends at Seeger Toyota of St. Robert. We are here for you.
Well, that'll just about do it for this episode of From the Studio. Remember, you can follow the show on Twitter at FromTheStudio22, or you can follow me at Corey Riggs TV. Please feel free to send us your questions, guest or topic ideas, take part in our online polls, and more. We like to close each show right now by highlighting a group or groups in the area that are doing their best to provide a helping hand to those in need. This week, I don't have a featured charity, but I do have a request. With every week that goes by, restrictions here in the Midwest are getting a little more relaxed. But each day I look at the newspaper and I see stories of bars and restaurants that are not going to reopen, cannot reopen, as this pandemic has hit them so very hard they cannot come back from it. So, for the local and national restaurants that are struggling to stay open wherever you may live, and more importantly, for the many men and women who work there, trying to make enough money and tips to pay the rent or keep the lights on, do me a favor. Go out to eat at least once this week. You don't have to go into the restaurant and sit down if you don't feel comfortable with that yet. Order a meal over the phone for a to-go or a curbside pickup. Either way is good, and you can tip the folks that bring the food to your car. Prior to the pandemic, a study was released that estimated over 50% of Americans at some point in time in 2020 will be living to paycheck for months on end. This was an article that was written back in February, so you can only imagine what that number might be now. So go out this weekend, hit up your favorite foodie spot, and maybe leave a little bit more on the table than normal. I guarantee it's needed right now, and I promise it'll be appreciated. Our final thank yous for this show go out to our guests from the Columbia Office of Cultural Affairs, Sarah Dresser, and Joel Goldberg from Fox Sports Kansas City. And as always, thanks to all of you for watching. Until next time, for our MC22 crew, I'm Corey Riggs, saying so long from the studio.